Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive with us.
Yeah, it's great to be back.
Today we're going to be looking at, uh, I think something we all struggle with,
Oh, yeah.
just making life better. And honestly, who hasn't spent hours scrolling through like countless self-improvement articles or whatever,
Mm.
feeling like totally overwhelmed by like how much advice is out there?
It's too much.
It is. So that's why today we're getting super specific
I
with a blog post that we found.
Right.
It's called 10 Small Ways to Make Your Life Better.
Love it.
And it's from Tickled Think.
Catchy.
It is. And actually, it's pretty recent. It was published in 2024.
Oh, wow. Okay, so it's pretty up to date.
It is. Yeah. So, I got to say, like, reading this
Yeah.
author's intro,
Mm-hmm.
the way they talk about just feeling overwhelmed by,
Mm-hmm.
needing to make these huge changes, like, in their life
Yeah.
to be happier,
Yeah,
really resonated with me.
I get that.
Because I think we all get stuck in that sometimes.
For sure.
And what I love about this blog is it's like, no, it's not about the giant leaps.
Okay.
It's about the small, consistent actions that you take.
I like that approach.
Yeah. So really excited to dig into these 10 tips with you.
Yeah, me too. And this is right up my alley. I think this small steps angle is a lot more promising than
Yeah.
some of the other stuff you see out there.
Yeah, for sure.
All right.
So why don't we just jump right in?
Okay, let's do it.
The first tip is all about letting go.
Interesting.
And what's interesting is the author talks about like clinging to comfort even when it was making them unhappy,
Right.
which I feel like so many of us can relate to.
Oh, totally.
Like whether it's, bad habits or like relationships that aren't serving us,
Oh, yeah.
we kind of like resist change even when we know it would be good for us.
It's that fear of the unknown, right? Even if what we know isn't really working.
It's so true.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's almost like our brains are wired to
Yeah,
be afraid of anything new, even if the old thing is causing us like pain or stress.
exactly. It's like we're comfortable with the discomfort.
Yes. And the author even admits to like sticking with these unhealthy relationships
Oh.
just because they felt familiar.
Wow.
But the point they make is that like this holding on
Yeah.
actually makes life harder.
Which makes sense when you think about it.
It does. Like if you
Yeah.
think about all the energy it takes to like maintain those things
Yeah.
that aren't actually serving us,
It's exhausting.
it is exhausting.
Yeah, and it's keeping you from all these other things that could be really good for you.
Exactly. Like new opportunities, new relationships.
Right, so it's almost like a self-sabotage in a way,
Totally.
holding on to that negativity.
Okay, so moving on to tip number 2.
All right.
This one is all about boundaries.
Okay.
And I'm raising my hand right now because this is something I
Oh, yeah.
definitely struggle with.
I think we all do.
How many of you out there are like chronic yes people,
Oh, my gosh, yes.
even when you are already so stretched thin?
It's so hard to say no.
It is. And the author of this blog post like really gets into the psychology behind that.
It's interesting.
Like that tendency to just want to people pleasers all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And they
Sure.
talk about how it comes from this belief that our worth
Yeah.
is like tied to how helpful we are.
Right, like we have to prove our value by always being there for everyone.
Yes, exactly.
Mm.
And so we end up feeling obligated to say yes,
Mm-hmm.
even when it's like completely compromising our well-being.
It's not sustainable at all.
It's not.
Yeah.
And the author talks about how they used to feel so guilty saying no, like they were letting people down.
I feel that.
But then they had this like aha moment where they were like, wait a minute,
Okay.
setting boundaries is actually self-respect.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
not selfishness.
Such a good point. It's about honoring your own needs.
Exactly.
And actually, there's research that shows that setting those healthy boundaries can actually make your relationships better.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you're communicating clearly what you can and can't do.
Right.
So there's no resentment building up. It makes sense. And it also lets you show up as your true self, which is what builds those really strong connections.
Okay, so I'm going to be totally honest with you.
Okay.
When I got to tip number 3,
Mm-hmm.
I kind of rolled my eyes.
No. What was
It was gratitude.
Ah.
And I know everyone's always saying like be grateful,
Yeah.
but especially when you're going through tough times,
Yeah.
it can feel a little bit like toxic positivity.
Right. Like you're just supposed to ignore all the bad stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm like,
Yeah.
is there a way to practice gratitude
Yeah.
that feels genuine and not like you're just
Right.
shoving your problems under the rug?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think you're right to be wary of that toxic positivity
Yeah.
because it's not helpful to just pretend everything's fine.
Right.
But there is a lot of research now that
Yeah.
suggests a more nuanced approach to gratitude can be really beneficial.
Okay, so what does that look like?
So instead of ignoring the negative, it's about actively focusing on the positive things in your life,
Okay,
even the small things.
got it.
And studies have shown that doing this can actually change your brain.
Really?
Yeah, it kind of rewires it to be more positive.
So it's like training yourself to see the good alongside the bad.
Exactly. And it's not about denying the negative, it's just about consciously trying to cultivate a more balanced perspective.
Interesting.
Yeah, because even in the midst of those tough times, there are always things to be grateful for.
Okay, so the next tip is one that I think a lot of us, myself included, have a really hard time with.
Oh, okay. I'm intrigued. What is it?
It's seeking help.
Oh.
And, we live in a culture that, really prizes self-reliance.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And so admitting that you need help
Mm-hmm.
can feel like
A weakness.
a weakness, yeah.
Yeah, you're supposed to just toughen up and figure it out on your own.
Exactly.
Bootstrap mentality.
And the author actually makes a really compelling argument against that whole mindset.
Okay.
They talk about their own journey of,
Right.
overcoming
Hmm.
this fear of being a burden and realizing that asking for help is actually a sign of strength.
It's funny how that shift happens.
It is.
Because it does feel like a weakness at first.
Yeah.
But then you realize it takes a lot of courage to actually admit that you need help.
Yeah. And they even talk about how they used to be terrified
Mm-hmm.
of reaching out for support,
Yeah.
thinking that it would make them seem like
Incapable.
incapable, incompetent, like they couldn't handle things.
Total.
But what they found was that actually leaning on others can be incredibly liberating.
It takes the pressure off.
It
Usually
does.
Yeah.
And, it allows us to tap into this whole network of support and expertise.
Right, because other people have different strengths and experiences.
Exactly. And so it's like acknowledging that you don't have to have all the answers,
Right. You don't have to do it all alone.
which I think is so reassuring.
It is. It's like a reminder that we're all in this together.
So basically, this blog post is suggesting that asking for help is actually like a smart and courageous thing to do.
Absolutely. And think about how much easier life would be if we all felt comfortable reaching out for support when we needed it.
Oh my gosh, that would be amazing.
Right.
Okay, so moving on to tip number 5. This one focuses on mental health.
Okay.
And the blog really emphasizes that it's just as crucial
Yes,
as physical health,
it's true.
but it often gets pushed aside.
Yeah, especially with our go, go, go culture.
Exactly. We're
Yeah.
constantly on.
Mm-hmm.
And the author actually shares their own experience with this.
Oh, wow.
They were so focused on achieving success
Mm-hmm.
that they ended up completely burned out and unfulfilled.
Right, so it backfired.
Totally. And they have this line that I just absolutely love.
What is it?
You can't pour from an empty cup.
Oh, that's so good.
It is.
And so true.
And it's like we can't expect to give our best
Right.
to others if we're running on empty ourselves.
Exactly.
And so prioritizing our mental health isn't selfish.
Right.
It's essential.
It's like putting on your own oxygen mask first before you can help anyone else.
Exactly. Okay, so getting real here for a second.
Okay.
Tip number 6 is about stopping negative self-talk.
Oof. Yeah, that's a tough one.
It is, and I think we all struggle with it,
Oh, absolutely.
at least to some extent.
For sure.
I know I can be my own worst critic,
Oh, me too.
all the time.
It's so easy to get stuck in that negative spiral.
It is. So do you have any insights into where this negative self-talk comes from?
Well, I think a lot of it comes from these deep-seated beliefs about ourselves
Okay.
that we might not even be aware of.
It
Like maybe from past experiences or societal messages, or even just our own unrealistic expectations.
So how do we start to combat that?
Well, the blog post has this really simple but powerful suggestion.
Okay.
Treat yourself with the same kindness and compassion that you would offer a friend,
Oh, that's good.
right? Imagine your friend is struggling with the same thing that you're beating yourself up about.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say to them?
Probably something really encouraging and supportive.
Exactly. But we tend to be so much harder on ourselves.
That's so true. We're like our own worst bullies sometimes.
Right. And the author emphasizes that this self-compassion isn't about lowering your standards.
Okay.
It's about creating space for growth.
I like that.
It's about recognizing that you're human, you're going to make mistakes.
Mhm.
And that's okay.
All right, so moving on to tip number 7.
All right, let's hear it.
This one is starting small.
Okay.
And the blog post suggests that when you're feeling overwhelmed,
Mm-hmm.
you should actually tackle the easiest task first.
Interesting. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think it's because even those small wins can like boost your motivation
That makes sense.
and your sense of accomplishment.
Right, it's like building momentum
Exactly.
instead of getting stuck in that feeling of overwhelm.
Yes. And so it's about like breaking down these huge goals
Mm-hmm.
into like smaller, manageable steps.
Right. So it doesn't seem so daunting.
Exactly. And this blog post really emphasizes that consistency trumps giant leaps that quickly fizzle out.
I love that because so often we try to do too much at once
We do.
and then we burn out.
Exactly.
Sick.
And so this is like a good reminder that those little things
Yeah,
do matter.
they add up.
Okay, so onto a tip that seems really simple,
Okay.
but can be surprisingly powerful,
I'm all ears.
especially when we're feeling stressed or anxious.
Oh.
Deep breaths.
Deep breaths.
I know, but it's like, why does something as simple as breathing
Right.
have such a big impact?
Well, it's because our breath is directly connected to our nervous system.
Okay.
So when we're stressed, our breathing tends to get really shallow and rapid,
Mm-hmm.
and that actually makes the stress worse.
Interesting. So by like consciously slowing down our breaths,
Exactly.
we can kind of signal to our bodies that it's okay to relax.
It's like hitting the reset button on your nervous system.
I love that. And the blog post suggests incorporating just a few minutes of deep breathing into your daily routine.
Which is so doable.
It is. It's like the easiest self-care practice ever.
Right? You can do it anywhere, anytime.
Okay, tip number 9 is complaining less.
Ooh, interesting.
And the author talks about how complaining actually made them feel worse,
That makes sense.
not better.
Yeah.
And I've definitely been guilty of that.
Oh, me too. It's so easy to fall into that trap.
It is. It's like a habit.
Yeah, and it feels good in the moment to vent,
It does.
but it can actually keep you stuck in a negative cycle.
So it's not about ignoring problems, but it's about like shifting your focus to what you can control.
Exactly. And to what's going right.
Okay. And finally, we come to the last tip,
Okay, number 10.
which is living one day at a time.
I like that.
And the blog post encourages us to let go of dwelling on the past or worrying about the future
Right.
and just focus on the present moment.
It's so hard to do, though.
It is, but why do you think that's so beneficial?
Well, our minds love to get caught up in what ifs
They do.
and should haves and what might happen.
Yeah, and that just creates so much anxiety.
It does. And it takes us away from the only moment we really have control over.
Which is right now.
Exactly.
And it's so easy to miss out on the beauty
Mm-hmm.
and the richness of life
Yeah.
when you're constantly stuck in your head.
It's like you're missing the whole movie because you're too busy reading the subtitles.
Oh, I love that.
Right.
And the author of this blog post has this great line that I think really sums it up.
Okay, what is it?
Life is too short to dwell on what might have been or what might be.
Mm-hmm.
The only moment we truly have is now.
So well said.
Right? Like it's such a good reminder to just embrace the present moment and make the most of it.
Be here now.
Exactly.
I love that.
Because life is really just a collection of moments.
It really is.
And it's up to us how we want to experience them.
So true.
You know, it's funny, going through these 10 tips,
Yeah.
they seem so simple.
Right.
But as we've been talking,
Mm-hmm.
I'm realizing there's like a lot more depth to them
I agree. There's a lot to unpack.
that I initially thought.
Yeah, and that's what's so good about this blog post.
Mm.
It takes these basic self-improvement ideas and makes them relatable and insightful.
It does. And it reminds us that like lasting change doesn't have to be about these dramatic overhauls.
Right.
It can just be these small little tweaks
Exactly.
we make.
The little things add up.
They do. So for you, what stands out as the most valuable takeaway from these 10 tips?
That's a good question. I think for me, it's the focus on self-compassion
Okay.
because it's so easy to be self-critical,
It is.
especially in today's world.
Yeah, like you feel like you always have to be achieving more, doing more, being more.
Right.
And so to just like treat yourself with kindness,
Yeah.
it's huge.
It's essential for well-being.
It is. And
Exactly.
for me, I think it's the reminder to live one day at a time,
Yes.
which is so much easier said than done.
Oh, totally.
But it's so easy to get caught up in like
yeah.
worrying about the future or dwelling on the past.
Mm-hmm.
And then we just completely miss out on the present moment.
It's like we're constantly chasing something that's not even real.
Exactly. And you know what I think it all comes down to?
What's that?
Letting go of control.
Ooh, that's good.
Because like so much of our suffering comes from trying to force things
Right.
to be a certain way.
Like we have to have it all figured out.
Exactly.
But life is messy.
It is
At
and
any
unpredictable.
stage.
And so
Yeah.
when we can just like surrender to that,
Mm-hmm.
embrace the uncertainty,
Yeah.
it actually creates space
Yeah.
for joy and
Mhm.
peace
And growth.
and growth.
Yeah.
So it's not about like becoming passive or giving up on your goals.
Right.
It's about recognizing that we
Mm.
can't control everything.
Exactly. It's finding that balance between striving and surrendering.
I love that.
Yeah, because you can still set goals and work towards your dreams, but you do it with this awareness that life is going to throw you curveballs.
It will.
And sometimes those curveballs end up being the best thing that ever happened to you.
So for our listeners out there who are feeling maybe a little bit overwhelmed
Yeah.
by all of this self-improvement advice, where would you recommend they start?
I would say pick one of these tips that really resonated with you
Okay.
and just focus on that one thing.
Okay.
Don't try to do everything at once.
Right, because that's how you get overwhelmed.
Exactly. It's like setting yourself up for failure.
So if someone is struggling with setting boundaries, maybe they could start by saying no to just one request this week.
Exactly.
Or if they're working on cultivating gratitude, maybe they could write down 3 things they're grateful for each day.
Love it. Small steps.
Small steps,
Big impact.
big impact.
Yeah.
And it's all about finding what works for you
Right.
and making it a sustainable part of your routine.
Exactly. Because self-improvement is not one size fits all.
It's not.
Yeah.
And it's important to remember that it's not a destination.
Mm-hmm.
It's a journey.
It's a process.
It is. And so there are going to be ups and downs,
Oh, for sure.
setbacks and breakthroughs.
Yep. That's all part of it.
And the key is to be patient with yourself.
Yep.
Celebrate your progress and never give up on your commitment to growth.
Beautifully said. I love that.
It's about like constantly learning and unlearning and evolving.
And becoming the best version of yourself.
Exactly.
But it's your journey.
It is. And speaking of making it personal,
Yes.
has anything we've talked about today,
Yeah.
like particularly resonated with you?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Anything you're thinking of trying out this week?
Well, I've been meaning to get better about my deep breathing.
Oh, yeah.
So maybe I'll try incorporating that into my daily routine.
I love that. It's so accessible.
It is. And I need something simple.
Exactly. Like
Yeah.
you can literally do it anywhere, anytime.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like a little pocket of calm
I love that.
wherever I go.
I mean, you know, it brings us back to the heart of this blog post.
Okay.
And what I think is like the most reassuring takeaway for our listeners.
Yeah, what's that?
Making life better isn't about
Yeah.
this huge transformation or reaching this state of like
Right.
constant bliss.
Like you're just going to be happy all the time.
Exactly.
It's not realistic.
It's about building resilience.
That's so important.
And the author's final point really hit home for me on that.
Okay.
It's not about being happy all the time.
Right.
It's about developing the inner strength to weather those inevitable storms.
And we all go through storms.
We do.
Yeah.
And that's something we can cultivate.
Yes.
Step by step.
One day at a time.
Exactly.
Okay.
So we're not aiming for perfection here.
Nope.
We're aiming for the ability to bounce back,
To learn and grow.
to keep moving forward even when things are tough.
It's like building those mental muscles.
It is.
The more you practice those small acts of self-care,
Mm-hmm.
the stronger you become.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
what's the one thing you hope our listeners take away from this conversation?
I hope they feel empowered
Yeah.
to take control of their well-being.
Yes.
Knowing that even small changes can make a big difference.
I love that.
Uh,
And that it's okay to start wherever they are,
exactly.
to experiment, to find what works best for them.
There's no right or wrong way to do this.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
All right.
So dear listeners,
Yes.
go forth and experiment.
Love it.
Choose a tip. Give it a try this week and see what happens.
You might be surprised
You might be surprised
at what you discover.
at the difference these small steps can make.
And remember, you don't have to do it alone.
Oh, that's such a good point.
Reach out to friends, family, or even online communities.
We're all in this together.
We are.
That's right. We're all on this journey of making life a little bit better,
One step at a time.
one step at a time. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. And until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep embracing this beautiful, messy thing we call life.
See you next time. And you know, when you're present like that,
Yeah.
you can approach each day with that sense of curiosity,
Oh, totally.
like openness to whatever comes.
Yeah, and like be surprised
Right.
by the unexpected.
Exactly. It
Right.
makes life a lot more fun.
It does. You know, it's funny, like looking back at these 10 tips,
Yeah.
they all seem so simple at first.
Right. Like, oh, yeah, I know that.
Yeah, but like as we're talking, I'm realizing there's like a lot more to them.
Totally. There's a lot of depth
Yeah.
to these seemingly simple ideas.
I think that's what makes this blog post so good. It
Mm.
takes these like basic self-improvement concepts
Mm.
and makes them feel really relatable.
Yeah, it's not like some guru on a mountaintop.
Right.
It's like a real person who's gone through these struggles.
Exactly. And it's like a reminder that lasting change doesn't have to be this like
Right.
massive, overwhelming thing.
Like you don't have to quit your job and move to a monastery.
Right.
You can just start with small, consistent actions.
What do you think is like the most valuable takeaway
Ooh, good question.
from these 10 tips for you?
I mean, for me, it's definitely the self-compassion piece.
Okay. Yeah.
Because it's so easy to get caught up in that negative self-talk.
It is. Especially, like I said before, like with today's culture.
Right, you're constantly comparing yourself
Yeah.
to other people.
And feeling like you're not enough.
Exactly. And so to just be kind to yourself
Yeah.
is huge.
It's huge. And for me, I think it's that reminder to live one day at a time. Which, like I said before, is so much easier said than done.
Oh my gosh, yes.
But it's so easy to get caught up
Yeah.
in that worry about the future
Mm-hmm.
or like the regret about the past.
And then you're just missing out on like
Yeah.
the beauty of right now.
And I feel like it all comes back to
What?
that idea of letting go of control.
Ooh, I like that.
Right? Because so much of our suffering, I think, comes from
Yeah.
trying to like force things to
Yeah.
be a certain way.
Like we need to have a 5-year plan
Exactly.
and know exactly what's going to happen.
But life doesn't work that way.
Nope. It's messy and unpredictable.
And so it's like when we can surrender to that,
Yeah.
embrace the uncertainty,
It's freeing.
it is freeing.
Yeah.
It actually creates that space for like joy and peace
Yes.
and growth.
Exactly.
So it's not about being passive
Right.
or
Yeah.
giving up on your goals.
You can still have goals.
Yeah.
But it's about
Yeah.
holding them lightly,
Yeah.
knowing that things might change.
Right.
And it's okay.
So for our listeners out there who are feeling maybe a little bit overwhelmed
yeah.
by all the self-improvement advice,
It can be a lot.
it can be a lot.
I'll-
Where would you recommend they start?
Honestly, I would just say pick one of these tips
Okay.
that really resonated with you
Okay.
and focus on that one thing
Okay.
for a week or two
Okay.
and see how it goes.
So if someone is struggling with boundaries, maybe you could try saying no to one request.
Exactly.
Small steps.
Small steps.
Big impact.
Or if they're working on cultivating gratitude,
Mm-hmm.
maybe they commit to writing down like 3 things they're grateful for each day.
I love that.
It's all about finding what works for you.
And what you can actually stick with. Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to remember that this isn't like
Right.
a destination.
Mm-hmm.
It's a journey.
It's a process.
It is. And so there are going to be ups and downs,
Yeah.
setbacks and breakthroughs.
It's all part of it.
And the key is to just be patient with yourself.
Yes.
Celebrate your progress and never give up
Never give up.
on that commitment to growth
I love that. It's about constantly learning and unlearning and evolving.
and becoming the best version of yourself.
But it's your version.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Speaking of making it personal,
Yes.
has anything we've talked about today
Mm-hmm.
like particularly resonated with you?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Anything you're thinking of trying out this week?
Well, I've been meaning to get better about my deep breathing.
Oh, yeah.
So maybe I'll try incorporating that into my daily routine.
I love that. And it's so accessible.
It is.
Right.
Like you were saying before, you can do it anywhere.
Anywhere, anytime.
Like a little pocket of calm
I love it.
wherever I go.
And you know, it brings us back to like the heart of this blog post.
Okay.
What I think is like the most reassuring takeaway for our listeners
Mm-hmm.
is that making life better
Yeah.
isn't about
Right.
this huge
But
transformation.
you're going to become a completely different person.
Right.
Overnight.
Or reaching this state of like constant bliss.
Right. Like you're just going to be happy all the time.
Exactly.
Right. It's not realistic.
It's about building resilience.
Resilience is key.
And the author's final point really hit home for me on that.
Okay.
It's not about being happy all the time.
Right.
It's about developing that inner strength to like...
To handle whatever life throws at you.
Exactly.
The ups and the downs.
And we all go through those.
We do.
And so it's like, that's something we can cultivate.
We can build that resilience
Step by step.
of one day at a time.
Exactly. So we're not aiming for perfection.
Yep.
We're aiming for the ability to bounce back,
Yes.
to learn and grow, and keep moving forward even when things are tough.
It's like building those mental muscles.
Right.
The more you practice those small acts of self-care,
Mm-hmm.
the stronger you become.
Yeah, and it's like those mental muscles, the more you work them out,
Yeah.
the stronger you get.
Exactly. And that's like the beauty of it, right? It's not about being happy all the time.
Right.
It's about knowing that you can handle whatever life throws at you.
And having the tools to cope.
Yes. So As we wrap up this deep dive,
Mm-hmm.
what's like the one thing
Yeah.
you hope our listeners take away?
Well, I hope they walk away feeling empowered.
Yeah.
Like they can actually make a difference in their own lives,
Yeah.
even with small changes.
I love that.
And that it's okay to start wherever they are,
Mhm.
experiment, find what works for them.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
All right.
So, dear listeners, go forth and experiment.
Yes.
Choose a tip.
Try it out.
Give it a try this week and see what happens.
You might be surprised.
You might be surprised at the difference it makes.
And remember, you don't have to do this alone.
Oh, that's so important.
Reach out to friends, family, online communities.
Yeah. Like we said, we're all in this together.
We are.
That's right. We're all on this journey of making life a little bit better, one step at a time.
One step at a time.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. And until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep embracing this beautiful, messy thing we call life.
See you next time.